Readers,
reviewers,
countrymen,
lend us your ears. And a huge thank you to all of our Patreons.
Thank you to the Pit Fighters, the First Swords, and all of the Bright Stars, Truth and Courage. Hello, welcome everyone who is standing, welcome everyone who is sitting, welcome everyone who is watching today's video on the Brothers Gwyn. Today myself, Ed, and my little baby brother, Will, are going to be talking about our favourite fantasy reads of the year. Now, we've already done a video that is part 1. This is part 2, and this is the cream of the crop. These are the books that are at the top of the ranking,
the very
as
best.
of when we wrote it. So it often changes.
It's already changed.
We
a
are
little bit.
fickle. We're fickle creatures. These Gwyn brothers, and we like to switch it around.
I call it
depending
evolution.
on the moon, but that's very quick evolution.
Yeah.
But I need to say no more. We should get straight into it. William, what is your, I believe, 4th favourite fantasy read of the year so far?
It is another 2023 release, as we talked about many times in our previous video, and this one is The Malevolent Seven by Sebastian de Castell. This is a new series, a new book by him, and I absolutely loved it. Hence why it's my 4th favourite fantasy read of 2023. So, of course, with that title, it's got that Magnificent Seven vibe. I love the trope of getting the band together. I think it was in the Chat with Two to Ramble that
The second best duo.
The second best duo is it may be us, Ed. I have to admit it may be us.
But we're brothers.
But how about two? I don't know. I was going to try and think of a joke, but yeah, no joke came to me.
Yeah, you're right. We suck.
But anyway, Two to Ramble, we chatted about favourite tropes, and I believe one of them said getting the band together. Maybe it was you.
It was me.
Maybe it was you. And so yeah,
even passing off their ideas as our ideas as theirs.
Sorry,
Great.
I took it too far, didn't I? But anyway, this is a fantastic take on that trope, and it executes it brilliantly, because as with all tropes, they could be done poorly because they're tropes that have been done before and you want something fresh, or they could be done in a unique way that, as I said, is fresh.
Do we want something fresh,
makes
though?
it engaging. Yeah, I want something fresh. Fresh meat's back on the menu, boys. And so,
good.
yeah, The Malevolent Seven, fantastic,
quotes
great.
make you up there.
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyway, so great characterization, really enjoy the plot, very satirical, dry, dark humour, which is, we love a bit of that. It's like we love it with Joe Abercrombie's works, don't we? And we love it with Sebastian de Castell as well. And we follow some magicians. They're not your typical magicians, and there may be a rat mage in there as well. It's pretty random, pretty absurd at times, but in a way with dark humour, and the characters are just trying to survive. They're not finding it enjoyable. They are being put through the ringer and experiencing every trial and tribulation that could come their way. They think surely it can't get worse. Then it storms, and then some rat mages appear. Along those lines, anyway.
Thank you.
What's your 4th favourite, Ed?
My 4th favourite of the year is The Judas Blossom by Stephen Orion, and this was an arc that we read early, wasn't it? We read it quite a few months ago now, and we are lucky enough to be published. In here, our review, we have a short paragraph saying what we loved about it. But this is a historical fantasy. I think this is the only historical fantasy on the list today. But it is a new kind of trend in fantasy to have this historical fiction setting, but with this little sprinkling of magic thrown in there for good measure. And Stephen Orion's The Judas Blossom is a fantastic addition to this subgenre of fantasy. Now, it is the 13th century, focusing on the Mongol Empire, what has been left from Genghis Khan's untimely death, and his grandchildren are kind of divvying up his great empire, really. And you have the Mongols trying to expand that empire, make just make it greater, basically. And then you have these factions who are trying to fight back, but they're not able to fight back in such a way as force, but they're having to go through different means, try different things to try and get back power. Now, you have a host of POVs. You've got, I think, 4 or 5 different POVs, and each one are very, very different. They are from the bottom to the top. You see what it is like at the top of Mongol society. You see what it's like fighting in the rebellion, and it reminds me of the Last War by Mike Shackle in that respect, that you have characters from all over the chessboard and they are all on different sides, and yeah, it plays out just as you think it would. chaotically. And Stephen Orion has a very direct way of writing. There is no kind of meat on his prose. It is very stripped back, but it is straight to the point, and I really, really like that. Straight to the arrowhead, I should have said. Anyway.
Very nice.
But yeah, like any good historical fiction book, what it does is that it makes you want to find out and dig a little bit deeper into that time period, and it wants you to experience that immersion ramped up to a 10 out of 10. And this book is definitely immersive. You can almost smell the environment, you can smell the food they're tasting, you can almost see the horrific remnants of what the Mongols have left behind them, of the cities, of the people, of the tribes, of the clans, and all sorts. And I absolutely loved this book. It is a fantastic addition to the fantasy genre, and I'm definitely excited to see what happens next. I think, is it called The Nightingale and the Falcon?
It's a great name for a series.
It is.
And so third up, I have The Combat Codes by Alexander Darwin. Ed chatted about it in part 1 of our top 10 fantasy books of 2023.
I did.
And so, this is very martial arts based. Alexander Darwin himself has a background. He is a teacher of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so he really adds that element to the story, which makes the action so unique. And I really love that. It really makes it feel like a very fresh story with its own lens, its own kind of prose that other authors can't bring to the table. And I love it when an author uses kind of the things that are unique to them and puts it at the forefront.
Only Alexander Darwin could have written this book.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And I love how that's how we've come with this very unique story that I thoroughly enjoyed. I really enjoyed the world building. We're only showing kind of a little snippet of the world and the setting. And a lot of it is kind of the underbelly of these cities, as we have these kind of gruesome kind of UFC fights, basically, but run by people who are kind of exploiting.
Or Bellator. Could be Bellator.
I don't get it, sorry.
Oh, it's another organisation that runs...
Oh, UFC, sorry, I thought you were meaning another name for a city. I was like...
Oh dear.
Not patronising at all.
Excuse me.
And anyway, so and so you really see the dark side to this, how people are being exploited, but then how kind of their aspirations are to become like knights of the country who all fight for the reputation and
it's not
for
a very
the power.
knightly environment, though, is it?
No, that's the thing. It's a facade, as many things, many organisations and governments in power are, aren't they? It's a facade of kind of control, but also of codes of honour as well. And you see a few of kind of the old timers trying to cling on to that, the combat codes, which is where we get our title from. And I really love kind of the unwilling trainer trope that we have with one
Apparently
POV,
he was based on Danny Glover.
Really?
Lethal Weapon.
With Lethal Weapon? Oh,
which is great.
That is awesome.
So I love him even more now.
Yeah, I love Danny Glover in Lethal Weapon. I love the Lethal Weapon films. But anyway, slight sidetrack. Thanks for that.
I love Danny Glover in anything.
I don't think I've seen him in anything else.
Maybe I have. Predator 2?
No, I haven't.
You need to get out more.
Yeah, I'll definitely definitely sit on the sofa and watch the film.
Stop watching The Office.
Yeah, I know. That's great. Anyway, so so I love that kind of unwilling trainer trope, and it's done really well here. But then also we have the younger person who's got a bit of mystery to their life, which we're finding out about. And I love how that is kind of we have breadcrumbs throughout to puzzle the pieces together. But that is my third favourite fantasy read of 2023, and that is The Combat Codes by Alexander Darwin.
And the next one for me is, we're getting into
big territory.
The big dogs. And this is number 3. It is called A Woman of the Sword by Anna Smith Spark. And Anna Smith Spark is notorious for her grim, dark writing abilities and also her almost mythical, legendary, epic prose that, as Peter McLean said, it felt like reading Homer, but the metal version. So, I'm here for that. And A Woman of the Sword is no exception, although it takes a very different story to her first trilogy. This is a standalone set in the same world as her first trilogy, but you do not have to have read any of those books. It is focusing on a mother, essentially imagine Orca, but different. So, there you go. And it takes this mother, and she is protecting her 2 sons, and she is an ex-soldier, a war veteran, and she has these 2 young boys of hers that she's trying to care for. And as you can predict, it's not all tea and scones and jam and sandwiches in the countryside. There's a lot of smoke, ashes, bloodshed, swords with rubies on the pommels. There are axes and heartache, and there are family arguments and drama, and there's great artwork, just like that. And it's a fantastic read. Anna Smith Sparks' prose, as I said in my review that I did a couple of months ago, I think, is essentially, to me, if Cormac McCarthy chose to write Sword and Sorcery. And yeah, it's great. She paints such a vivid picture, but the colours she uses are quite drab. So it's vivid, it's vibrant, but it's bleak, and it is harrowing to read at some points. But it is almost an essential read, I think, and especially as a fantasy fan, I love seeing the different ways that fantasy go, the different directions, and it always leads you to something amazing. And this book is no exception. It's a book that on paper maybe I'd be like, oh, okay, would I actually enjoy that? You read it, and the result is something quite mesmerising. So yeah, hats off to Anna Smith Spark. And
earlier on Rekindle Readers Theo's channel, I saw that someone said that they think women between the ages of 30, 40, 50 as characters are very underrepresented in books, especially as POVs. And they said the only one they could think about is Orca from Shadow of the Gods. So yeah, if that person's watching, or if Theo knows them personally, then let them know. Read Woman in the Sword. I've not read it, but it sounds like a book for them. So my number 2 pick is The Judas Blossom by Stephen Orion. So this is another 2023 release, and I'm being so boring because it's another book that Ed's already talked about. He's pipped me to the post. That is the saying, isn't it? Pip to the post? Yeah. Why is that? What's Pip? Poor Pippin. Anyway, The Judas Blossom, historical fantasy at its finest. As Ed said, we are honoured to be mentioned in our quote in the beginning. Not in the actual book, but before the book starts. And so yeah, The Judas Blossom by Stephen Orion. Historical books don't often feel epic enough for fantasy readers to really kind of dig their heels in, but this is an exception.
It's pretty epic.
It is.
I know there's a lack of dragons, but
I was gonna say there's no dragons, there's no monsters, but it still feels so epic.
There are monsters,
and we do have the fantastical element, but it's pretty minor in book 1. I feel like it's going to be explored a lot more in book 2, but it is epic because we are thrust into the Mongol Empire at its height. And I believe the Mongol Empire was the greatest, or in landmass, the biggest empire of all time.
I don't believe this was at its height. I think its height was prior to this. With Genghis Khan.
No, because his son, Kublai Khan, significantly grew it. 100%.
He wasn't his son. He was his nephew, I believe.
Kublai Khan, was he? Oh, it may have been his nephew. But he went into Russia, so... and that's where they kind of got to the borders of Europe. I believe 1260 was actually their peak.
I think with Genghis Khan, they were already in Europe. Or close to it, I think.
Maybe. I'm not...
Yeah, anyway, but yeah. So it's a pretty big empire. I think it was the biggest, the greatest.
It at least is amongst the biggest. And one of the main kind of motives of some of these characters is that they are very high up in the Mongol Empire, and so they've kind of got that kind of those hegemonic values of we must expand the borders and incorporate different cultures and different factions that we have to submit to our will, and so that really comes into play. And conflict is a huge element. Large scale conflict. You do. And that's just in there. But yeah, so these I love the characters at the core because we see them from a vast array of backgrounds, where they come from the highest of the high, making all the major decisions, to those who are unwillingly brought to the forefront. And I love how they have their own...
I did say that earlier. You are just regurgitating me.
I'm just regurgitating you. But it also feels very David Gemmell-esque because the prose... We have enough historical detail that it feels very immersive and it feels very unique, and it's very different from the kind of the typical medieval Europe fantasy that we see, isn't it? And so it feels very different, but it's not too much detail that it's overwhelming. It's still got that David Gemmell-esque way of feeling stripped back and efficient, so that the story feels fast-paced. And that accompanied by the multi-POV style, where we're kind of jumping about different settings, makes it feel very fast-paced and always fresh. And as Alan said, it's enough about the historical detail to make you want to learn more about the period, which any good historical fiction book should do. So it succeeded in that way as well. Stephen Orion, just from the first page to the end, really thoroughly enjoyed it. There's no weak POV. They're all really enjoyable in their own rights, and I love seeing how kind of they started to link. That was a huge strength of this book. As we go through it, they link and interweave in and out of each other, and these characters have huge impacts on the others surrounding them, even if those others do not know it. And so yeah, really thoroughly enjoyed that, and yeah, a really well crafted book as well. And so yeah, my second favourite fantasy read of 2023 so far.
And numero 2 for me is The Malevolent Seven by Sebastian de Castell. I'm going to basically do a bit of what William does now. You're
copying me.
And I'm going to regurgitate what William says. But I'm going to say something slightly different. That what I love about this book is the dry wit, the dry humour, which has always been seen in the Great Coats and anything Sebastian writes, really. But yeah, particularly prevalent here as well. But as Will said, you have that the Malevolent Seven, the Magnificent Seven. You're getting that trope of, you're getting a band together for one kind of purpose, but these are the bad guys. They are not the good guys. What I love here is actually the magic system. Usually I'm not a big fan. I don't really care how magic comes into play, really. I just like to know that it has consequences. Here there are consequences, but also boy, it is a very different magic system to anything I've read before. Essentially, these mages, these very powerful people, have to kind of purchase these spells from demons, from, the circles of hell, really, which is really, really interesting. I love that dynamic.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're just using it willy-nilly to just to blow everything
grow
up.
Their plants.
Exactly, they're not raising people from the dead, and it's not epic in that sense, but it is, they are having to think ahead of what spells they're going to want to use, what things they're going to want to cast, which is really, really fascinating.
It's like picking weapons and armour, isn't it?
It is, but also, having to trade. So it's not like, and once you use it, you don't get it back. So I really like that dynamic of it. But yeah, I really like all the cast, the different characters. I like that it is focusing on the bad, really. I think that's quite an interesting take, especially in a modern setting as well. I could definitely see how cinematic this was, that it would be great on a screen. I think people would love it, especially if as the Dungeons and Dragons film went down so well.
Yeah,
I think this would definitely be a worthy kind of second to that as well. But on the other side, rather than the good, looking at the chaotic good, chaotic bad.
Yeah, it's very different from Sebastian's usual books. I've read 10 books by him. That's my 11th
That's
book.
A flex, Will.
Wow.
That is a flex.
That's crazy.
How many has he written?
I think 12, so I've got one more to go.
I think it's a short story collection as well, but yeah.
So 13. Yeah. Got them all just above where you can see on the shelves there. Haven't got the grey coats.
Prove it.
I can't get them all down there. But anyway, I really enjoyed that. It's different from his usual main character, where the main character is usually an objectively very good person, and everyone around them knows that they're a good person. Whereas this one, you're rooting for him. He is a good person, but he views himself...
Is he, though?
Not in that way. And he does do some questionable things along the way.
Yeah, and I like that.
But yeah.
Will, honourable mention time. We've been really good, and I think this shows that we're maturing and we're becoming adults. And we've chosen only 2 honourable mentions rather than the typical
cheating with 3. So yeah,
so we're cheating, but less
slightly.
So essentially, we're on a book diet.
It's all about perspective, isn't it?
Exactly, and it's all relative.
It's all relative.
Compared to last time, we've improved. We've made progress. So Ofsted would be happy. Over to you, Will.
Thank you, Ed.
Mention number 1
is The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. It's very interesting that you included The Burning God, book 3, and I'm including book 2.
I think the more we read, the more we have vastly different opinions lots of the time.
Yeah.
And I am interested to see what you think of book 3.
Often the books we love are the same.
I don't know.
Well, look at all the books we've included in this list.
True.
But, the Burning God wouldn't go down in your top 20 of all time, would it?
If R.F. Kuang is watching?
Yeah.
I'm joking.
But, whereas what I read, Babel by R.F. Kuang, would go down in mine. Have you read that yet?
No. Have you read Yellowface?
No, but it's next up for me.
There you go, then.
Oh, alright, it's like that then.
If you want to turn into a competition...
Did you see that? Did you see...
No, it's 3-0.
Did you see the Venom?
It's 3-0.
In the hat?
It's 3-0, I'm going to read it.
3-0 what?
Oh no, it's 4-3 to me.
No, I've read Babel 4 and all 3. So we both read 4.
You haven't read The Burning God, Will?
Yes, I have. I've read it before you.
The Burning God?
Yes, book 3. I read it before you.
Oh, did you?
And we had a chat about it.
I'm literally having a conversation saying I'm really intrigued to see what you think of The Burning God. What?
We've both read.
Have you read it?
The entire trilogy.
I had no idea.
We had long conversations.
Did you like it?
We chatted about the end, and I said how there's basically two endings, and I really enjoyed one, but I just didn't know what to think of the other.
Oh.
And then you mocked me in a video saying, "Yeah, great booktube video where you can't say what you actually think." Because I said I don't even know how to put it into words.
You hang on to grudges too long.
No, definitely not. I didn't write it down. But anyway, The Dragon Republic, really enjoyed it. I wasn't so keen on book 1, but book 2 really thoroughly enjoyed because, as Ed said last video, it's not a series where you're, per se, rooting for the characters. No. But here I felt a purpose.
Felt history, you're just seeing how it plays out.
Yeah, but here there was a purpose and a drive, and it's all about power. And that's what this book
is. It's about drive.
It's about power. We get hungry, we devour.
I can't remember quoting The Rock.
I know.
You probably will watch this, actually.
Yeah, I think you have a different conception of the audience of the Brothers Grimm.
No, my audience is The Rock, R.F. Kwan.
Yeah, they're the ones sitting down and to watch the Brothers Grimm.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis.
Okay. Anyway, so yeah, that is The Dragon Republic for me. What's your first?
My first honourable mention is The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Baker. Now, this is a very philosophical, intriguing book that is full of very gripping prose, lots of complex ideas, a world-building system that is very thoroughly thought out. It kind of reminds me of Gardens of the Moon in the aspect that you're kind of left to your own devices just to survive and tread water really in this world. I really like the multi-POV aspect. There were some POVs that I thought, I don't want to read your name ever again, but there were some POV aspects that I thought this is a really intense and really fun read. I think every name in this book is the names are awful. The names are so bad. But it's a great read.
So the good perspectives must have been amazing for it to be.
Yeah, there were some perspectives that I just thought these were absolutely amazing. Like some of the best moments in fantasy happen here as well.
Just didn't have consistency.
Neon is my favourite perspective, I think. But The Dance That Comes Before was a very interesting read. I like the historical inspiration is obviously borrowing very heavily on the Crusades of the 12th, 13th and the 14th centuries. So, very interesting. I like to read it in a fantasy setting.
Are you going to carry on with the series any point?
I will definitely carry on with it. Maybe not soon.
Because I believe book 2, or it may have been book 3, was Jimmy over in the Fantasy Network's favourite read of 2022.
Ooh. Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
My second honourable mention is The Lessons Never Learned by Rob J. Hayes, the second instalment of his War Eternal series. And yeah, I've read book 1 in December, and I've read the next 4 and finished them all. And this was my favourite instalment of the series.
He is the self-pub king, isn't he?
He is.
Yeah.
He is. He's one of them anyway, and he's probably the OG indie self-published king. Because there's many other indie authors that have come out with
he's still the king.
Huge. But anyway, yeah, he's a fantastic
You can't write
author.
Never Die and then not be the king.
I know, it's a fantastic book, and I'm so glad My Book Reviews picked it up and more people are talking about it now because it's an awesome book. But anyway, Lessons Never Learned. So book 1 is in quite a small setting, and so I really enjoyed book 2 whilst book 1 was great, I love how book 2, Rob J. Hayes had the confidence to explore beyond that, not having each one the same. And so here is where we are really just let loose upon the world that he's created. And we garnered so much information, and we got the trophies of the world to explore. And with our cast of characters, with Eska, who is a fantastic chronicler's perspective as she's telling the story of her life. And thoroughly enjoyed it. Eska, a great main character. The Lessons Never Learned. Great read. What are you laughing at?
And the next one for me...
What are you laughing at?
Don't worry. And the next one for me was Lapvona, which is by Otessa Moshfegh. And this is a disgusting, grotesque, harrowing, horrific medieval fantasy, really. And it is focusing very much with a Stephen King vibe on the lives of this village in an unknown place, in an unknown fiefdom in the medieval Europe. And it's a very interesting read. I really, would I say enjoyed it? Yeah, I did enjoy it because I was reading it and I couldn't put it down. But there are some horrible, horrific moments, and Moshfegh's mind is not a place that I'd want to dwell on for too long because, the ideas in this book were really, really strange and peculiar. And if you just look at my list of adjectives there, you know that you will know if this is a book for you or not. But it focuses on this multi-POV approach to discovering what's life like in this medieval village, and you have kind of commentaries that could feel very modern within it. You have this kind of upper class that are hoarding lots of things. You have the lower class that are living on next to nothing, and you have a host of very strange and interesting, intriguing, and well-developed characters that inhabit both areas. And it's a very riveting read. At times, you don't want to read it ever again. It's pretty gross. But it sticks out in the memory, and that is one thing that literature can do that's very powerful.
Very nice, Ed, and yeah, it's one that I need to read. But now, on to the number 1 spot. Drum roll, please. I have The Way of Adan by Philip Chase, Dr. Fantasy himself. And so just for transparency, we're lucky enough to call Dr. Fantasy himself a friend of ours, aren't we? And but I don't believe that affects my opinion on his work. I think I could give an honest opinion on what I think of books that I read.
Can I show my number 1 as well?
Yeah.
It is The Prophet of Adan. Now, I didn't include The Way of Adan in my thought process because I read it last year.
Ah. So well,
you did not get the memo.
Well, we couldn't talk about it last year.
Technically, we did talk about it.
Well, we did with Philip, but we couldn't...
It wasn't released.
I read it again in March, and this is the year we've been able to talk about it. It is the year of Philip, releasing one instalment every 3 months. And so this is... In a way, it's not a surprise that it's our favourite, because Philip said to us last year, he was saying all his inspirations and what went into this book. And it is that mix of kind of traditional fantasy with modern fantasy. It's kind of got that Tolkien-esque Ursula Le Guin feel, especially with kind of the approach to the landscape and kind of the world playing as a character of its own, really. Mm-hmm. And with kind of the beautiful prose into the mix as well. But then modern with kind of the... There is a good and bad side, but the many characters in the middle, you're not quite sure where they fit on the chess table. And so, that's where kind of the modern element comes into play as well. And you're kind of divided and you're not quite sure who to root for. And I love kind of those questions that keep you really engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think The Prophet of Adan is Philip's strongest work to date. I know we've only read 2 books, but for 100%, I think this book it blows book 1 out of the park. And I absolutely adored book 1. It's one of my favourite reads of last year. But as Will said, listening to Philip's inspirations and his influences behind this series, you guys as viewers on the channel will know how we share this kind of literary canon really with Philip, don't we?
Yeah.
And just knowing Philip's knowledge of Anglo-Saxon poetry, you can see that this is just a mashup of Gemmell's characters meeting Tolkien's landscape, meeting the themes and ideas of Anglo-Saxon poetry. And it's a fantastic read. For us, it's a historical fiction, it's a world but with fantastical names and Philip's own ideas into the history and the world building. This book is far quicker, far more direct. It has I think the arcs are more satisfying, and I think the writing is even better. You have fantastic characters. I won't name them because then if you haven't read book 1, you don't know who survives, that kind of thing. But characters die. There are some huge moments in this book. And I think, I know reading The Prophet of Adan, this is the only book that's ever made me feel like I'm reading a continuation of The Faith and the Fallen. Like, it actually felt like this could be a Papa Gwyn book, which is the highest compliment I will ever be able to give anyone. I wish that in my own writing I could kind of feel like The Faith and the Fallen, because that is just... it feels like that's part of my DNA, and this book does as well. It feels like I was meant to read it, and Philip was meant to write it, and I absolutely loved it.
Awesome. So they are our top 10 fantasy reads of 2023, and
it's not just because Philip's paid me. Like, it's not because of that at all.
I mean, that helps.
There are many other reasons. I mean, Philip paid me specifically for the number 1 spot, so yeah. But anyway, I'll send you my bank details later, Philip. But truth and courage to that.
Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Don't believe Ed, he's
an idiot.
I wasn't going to say that. No, I genuinely wasn't.
What are you going to say?
I don't know.
Sometimes not saying something is worse.
I was going to say he's joking.
I'm not joking.
Nice to meet you. Anyway, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Let us know what your favourite fantasy reads of 2023 so far are down in the comments below. And let us know if you've read any of the ones that we've read. What were your thoughts on them? Any that you're going to pick up soon?
I like them all, actually.
And so many more questions. And I wasn't asking Ed. I already know your answers. But very interested to see what our viewers say. But everyone, thank you so much for watching. Truth and courage, the Brothers Gwyn.
Truth and courage. Stay safe from the Brothers Gwyn.